Welcome everyone to the Our Whole Lives Taking Flight webinar series. My name is Amy Johnson and I am the Minister for Sexuality, Education and Justice in the United Church of Christ. And with me today is my dear colleague, Melanie Davis.
Hi, I'm Dr. Melanie Davis. I am the Unitarian Universalist Association's Our Whole Lives Program Manager. And that's my dog Bella in the background.
We can, I think many of us can relate to that right now in these times. And we want to welcome you today to our topic, which is the revisions flight status. And I think that was a very fortuitous title, Melanie, that you came up with for this one, because things are so much in flux in so many ways, and definitely in flying and flight status in our country and in the world right now. So thank you for being here today. I know Andrea's still letting a few people in, but again, welcome to this webinar series and Happy New Year. And I was in a yoga class earlier this week where the instructor recommended that we just sort of treat 2022 with caution. I thought that was some lovely advice. So with that, I'm gonna send it over to you, Melanie, for the opening.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we are mindful that, we had hopes that this lockdown would, when we started this, we called it taking flight because we thought, 6 months, this will all be over. And here we are, and new variants and things keep going. And we're mindful that, especially over the winter holidays with people who may not have been able to be with family or who were struggling with illness or family members' illnesses. There's just still a lot of ongoing stress. And we're also aware that you were probably working on getting your programs back in gear, and suddenly the sand is shifting again. So this reading is called For My Friends Who Are Wounded. It is by Barbara Road from her book In the Simple Morning Light. And it's part of the collection Day of Promise, published by Skinner House. If I could, I would go to them and say it was only a dream. I would sit beside them and hold them in their dark and let their tears fall on the soft sleeves of my gown. I would kiss their hair. I would talk softly to them. I would tell them the secrets of fireflies and stars and the frost lace on the windows and the harvesting of corn. I would sing the grandfather's songs. I would bring small gifts in my hand, white spiraled shells and crimson leaves, smooth stones, a hyacinth, a peach. Then we would stand by the window, our arms around each other's waists. We would breathe in the cold night air. We would make promises and wait silently, still, listening for the bright, brave, astonishing light. So with that, we will walk cautiously together into 2022. So we're going to, do you want to talk a little bit, Amy, about what we're going to be doing today?
Yeah, and thank you so much. That was a beautiful reading. I'm noticing, I don't know how it is for all of you, but I'm noticing that I don't really think I can get enough or too much nurture right now. Just those moments of pausing and replenishing, and in whatever ways we can do that. So here's some just general information for you. You may know this, you may not know this, but for several years now, really since 2014, when the 7th through 9th grade curriculum was first revised into a second edition, we have been in a continual state of revising the Our Whole Lives curricula. And we have done that it's sort of like in the order of urgency in terms of how many people use each level of the curricula. So we have been working on those different revisions, and there are several stages to that. So we decide to revise something, we hire an author or authors, they do a rough draft, it's critically read for gender justice, racial justice, ability justice, all of those things. It's revised. then it goes into field testing, then it goes into developmental editing, and all that happens before it even gets to publishing pipeline. So we have had several levels going in terms of revision over the last several years. We've had K1, 10, 12, young adult, all, and plus we released, written by our very own Dr. Melanie Davis, Our Whole Lives for Older Adults. So all those things are going on. And when the shutdown happened, many things shut down with it in terms of our revision process. One, really obvious one was that we were really seriously, like the next week, going to start the K1 field testing, and that had to wait. That should be concluded now, and we're working on that. But just so you know, and then the other things even that could happen while things weren't happening in person had to be set aside. I'm sure many of you can understand this, while we created other things to help people who were in shutdown and isolation. So that's kind of the general overview of where we are. And Melanie's going to take a little bit of time now to go over some of the specifics of what's happening, why some things are out of print, where we are in the process. So over to you, Melanie.
Thank you very much. Among the things that Amy was talking about is we're starting online OWL trainings, facilitator training. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So as part of the continuation of the process that Amy was discussing with revisions, there are also interim changes that happen, and that's called reprints. So what the UUA, so the UUA has the publications office. We co-publish with the UCC, but the physical part of it is handled by the UUA. And rather than keeping thousands and thousands of copies of something on hand, we generally reprint about every year to 2 years. We have another batch of each edition that we reprint. And so Amy and I have an opportunity every time a reprint happens to make small changes, correct, URLs to links, change some language. For example, a while ago, we changed all the he, she's to theys to, so we can make small changes. And what happened last year is when the opportunities came to make more of those small changes, we realized that the changes were so significant that it would be, we felt, irresponsible to try to put little tiny Band-Aids on these big significant changes. So for example, there are just some things that are woefully outdated in the 10, 12, and young adult editions in terms of sexually transmitted infections and contraceptives. What we have allowed to happen in consultation with the publications office is to allow things to go out of print. So we are not reprinting the kindergarten through first grade edition. We are not reprinting 10, 12, and we are not reprinting young adult because these revisions are all in process. The first one that'll be ready will be K1, and Amy's going to give you a little bit more detail about that. But we're so close to getting that out that it just didn't make sense to have people paying money for a really outdated version. So we're sorry. For those of you who are sending people to trainings, for secondary trainings, typically you would buy either the 7 to 9 or the 10 to 12. You can't get 10 to 12. But what the trainers are doing is they're providing activities from it. They're introducing, how teenagers think that's different from the way middle schoolers think. And they're talking about how to update that content until the new edition comes out. So we're creating workarounds, and the trainers are creating workarounds. And Amy and I are going to be, as we go forward today, talking about more resources that we have to help you do that. So Amy, why don't we start that phase of our conversation?
Yeah, so somebody was just asking in the chat about, is the parent guide going to be updated too? And so what I want to say about that is that it's already been updated because we updated the 4th through 6th grade curriculum back in 2017, which is like 5 years ago now, right? I mean, it's just this, like I said, it's a constant state of revising. So that will be another project that we have once we release the K1 revisions. We want to make sure we have those solidly. So once we get the field test material and are able to developmentally edit that and get that to publication, then when we know solidly what the material will be, a final version, then we would work on the parent guide revisions for that. So that's another project that we have. So in the meantime, what we've done is we have created some kind of, I don't know what we want to call them, addendums or go-to guides, or like, here's some stuff you can do, basically.
Well, we're calling them recommended updates. So.
Yeah. And it isn't, they aren't, some of them are more detailed than others, but if you know, we already have one for the 7th through 9th grade. And we will be creating one for 4th through 6th as well. And we don't have that yet, but we will be, because we're getting more and more requests for that. So it's kind of a stopgap in between, because of this lengthy process that we go through in terms of revisions, to help between the material that's printed and what's coming next. So that's kind of what we have for you. And the thing is that this process that we go through, while it is so lengthy and labor intensive, is one of the things that makes our whole lives so great, because it is critically read for these things by people in the community with lived experience. And it is field tested, and we get feedback from people in congregations that are using the material before we publish it. So that said, I want to show you where you can find these recommended updates right now. And so I'm going to share my screen and letting you know that it's on the UUA website right now. It isn't on the UCC website yet, because we're in the middle of updating the Our Whole Lives pages. But if you can see this here, up here in this left-hand corner, you can see that it's on the page, the regular uua.org/re/owl. I don't know about you, but that just pops right up every time I start to do that.
Amy, can you maybe go higher up so they can see the very top of the page and see
Sure.
where that fits on the page?
And then it's /facilitators. So when you get there, this is the top of the page. And then you need to come down. Just a little side comment. I really love the owl picture on the top. Melanie's a genius at finding appropriate owl pictures. So down here, if you scroll pretty far down, you'll see the 2022 recommended updates. And so, for instance, I'm just going to click on this so you can see that this is recommended updates, and it has some different sections, like what are universal changes you should make throughout the whole curriculum. And that is generally going to be, in almost all levels, going to be language. So language is more inclusive and less binary. And then what to do in the parent orientation, what to do in workshop sessions, and storybooks suggestions. And these are all storybooks that are recommended by our new authors from the K1 revisions. And then also down here in the K1 revisions, you have it's from 2015 or something like that, but it is an updated conception story. It doesn't have every way that children can be conceived, but it does have some different conception options here, so you can see that. And I'm going to go back and just show you another one so you can see that. So for 10-12, it's obviously more detailed, because it's a quite a different and more there's more content in the 10-12 than there is in the K1. And so again, you'll see this universal changes throughout the curriculum, and then what to do differently in the parent orientation, what to replace, and then the sessions and workshops. And in this one, Melanie's gone session by session, so you can see what our recommendations are for things that you can update. Again, that's not going to be perfect, but if you do have the K1 or the 10-12 And if you are, oh my gosh, we have this cohort and we really want to run it this year, please know that that you can use this and do your best with it. And one of the things also that I want to say about Our Whole Lives is that there is a lot of the value of the program is in gathering together, especially in faith communities, and discussing these topics. So while these are generally, really well written and cookbook style and bring up a lot of topics that people don't necessarily usually talk about in church or talk about with youth, and they show you how to talk about them, even if it's not perfect, there's still value in gathering together with the families and youth and adults in your faith communities and having these conversations. And if you find something in the curriculum that is outdated or something, you can say, let's talk about how this has changed since this was written. And, you're welcome to send suggestions to Melanie and myself. And we certainly will pass those on to any authors that we have. But I just want to not miss the forest for the trees,
Right.
which is that the value of this is that we gather together and provide a safe space with trusted adults in our faith communities to have these conversations.
It occurs to me, Amy, that another option is if they look in the COVID resources, under the same link that you had showed before, on the, when you can't do OWL online, do this. If they look at the suggestions that we made for adapting conversations for online purposes, that focus exactly what you're talking about. Continuing the conversations, continuing to listen to the music of Our Whole Lives and the values, but not necessarily worrying as much about the nitty gritty stuff. And, which video goes with that?
Right.
But we have provided these updates, as Amy said, to help those of you who do want to press forward. And I don't know how, we have no idea how many of you are even able to do that.
I talked to some people who have, I'm going to just say one thing really quickly, and that is, if you have a question, I'm seeing them pop up in the chat, and I'm going to ask if you have a specific question, if you could put it in the Q&A. It's really, really a lot easier for us to manage that than to scroll back up through the chat to find them. So if you could please put specific questions you have in the Q&A, that would be great. I also see someone raise their hand. We'll get to a Q&A portion in just a minute. I've talked to different people, and it just depends so much where you are in the country and what your specific region is, whether you're UCC or UUA, what your conference minister is recommending, what your council or your board is recommending, what your people feel safe about. We have some webinars that we've done around things to consider that maybe you haven't when you're restarting your Whole Lives program. But I know people who've used the recommendations that we put out and have done it, done a version of it online. And I know people who have done it, socially distanced and masked in person. So it really, there's no one size fits all here. There's just
absolutely not. Absolutely not. So let's talk about where we go next. So as Amy was talking about this whole process of the developmental editing and the field testing and everything, another aspect of this is the production logistics. And usually if there are any holdups, it's on our end, because we're dealing with contributing authors, our own schedules, our own changes in priorities, all sorts of unforeseen things. So normally when we are done with a manuscript, we don't give it to the publications office until it's as done as we can make it. And the format is right. And we've done everything that we can do. And then it goes to publications. And they still do a process of formatting, what used to be called typesetting. They make it look beautiful, and they have an editor who looks at it to make sure that the terminology that we used on page 150 is the same as the terminology that we used on page 20. The wonderful copy editors that they have. We get it back. We get to answer their questions. And then and then it goes back to them for proofreading and inserting any changes and addressing any issues. We get it back after that, and we show it to the author, and the author gets to decide whether they still want their name on it, because maybe after the field test, it looks a lot different than what the author intended. So there are a lot of steps that go into the production. But typically that process takes 6 months. Once we turn in the manuscript, it takes 6 months. Publications is a wonderfully well-oiled machine. However, they do have their own production schedules. So if we submit something, if we tell them you're going to get it here and we submit it late, they've already got other things in the hopper. So they're beholden to many, many, many other people's priorities other than our whole lives. The other issue is that right now, just as along with any grocery store you go to or whatnot, there are supply chain issues. So given that we're working with paper and ink and other kinds of supplies, while there are outside factors that will affect when things actually get published. So it's important that you know that, because we're going to give you some timeframes, but we don't want you planning your lives around these timeframes. Okay, so for example, Amy, maybe you can talk about K1 and the plans that we have for K1 and how that might be impacted if there's no paper.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much I can speak to that. So I will say supply shortages are real. They're just real right now, y'all. So where we are with K1 is that we were going to field tested in March of 2020, and it was field tested by a small group of congregations this fall. So where we are right now is like in this morning, I was emailing with the person who at the UUA who can pull all the feedback so that Melanie and I can look at it and decide if there's anything that needs to be revised from that feedback significantly, and then hopefully get that to publications. We're also dealing with part of my sabbaticals in there. It's just real life, folks. It's just real life. So all of that is going to happen, and hopefully it will be to the publication department by mid to late March, which would mean by the 6-month thing that we are hopeful that there might be, look at all my qualifiers in my sentence, we are cautiously optimistic and hopeful that there might be a K1 second edition available for purchase sometime late this year. And again, if there's no paper, or if too many people are out either ill or quarantining because of an exposure or isolating, then things might not go on that particular schedule.
There's another thing that we haven't even mentioned, is that concurrent with the creation of Our Whole Lives, once the document is field tested and we have a rough idea of what we're working with, then we create the Sexuality in Our Faith.
Yeah, and
we find authors for that, and that goes through its own process. So we're actually publishing 2 manuscripts at the same time.
Yeah, and or 3 in this case because of the parent.
Right.
So anyway, all of those things are happening, and it is highly, highly, highly unlikely that the K1 second edition and the Sexuality in Our Faith second edition and the Parent Guide third edition would all be ready at the same time.
Yeah,
that's just
yeah.
And so there you go. That's just it. It's just bandwidth and processes and where we are.
Yeah. And we'll remind you all that the OWL offices, the national staff, are me and Amy. And we have some wonderful administrative help, and Andrea is wonderful for helping us with these webinars, but it's us, folks, and some wonderful
for Andrea and Jenny right now, though, because they are pretty awesome. So awesome for us.
Yeah, so let's move on. In fact, Genia has a question about high school, which is our next one. We are not revising 7 to 9 and 4-6. That's not on the plate right now. So we're focusing now on getting you K1, 10, 12, and young adult.
But there are recommended updates for 7 through 9.
There are the recommended updates for
Will
adults
eventually be
and
for-
adults. We also have recommended updates for adult. Somebody asked about recommended updates for OWL for older adults. That just came out in 2019. It's fine. Go use it. Please use it.
Please use it. Please use it. It's beautiful.
So I am working on the developmental editing for 1012 right now. My assignment date is to get it to publications in March. But our priority is K1. So when we submit our manuscripts to publications, we will let them know, please do K1 first. And then, in your queue, let 1012 be after that. So, that's what we're hoping for. I can share a little bit about 1012, which is kind of exciting to be able to share that. So I think Amy put in the chat earlier, we have a Canadian author who worked on the revision, and we've already field tested it. We have 12 workshops. We changed the format. The current 1012 has kind of a, pick this or pick this or pick this. It's kind of like picking fruit and putting it in a basket and getting a workshop out of it. The format that you will see with the second edition is more like 7 to 9. It's a turnkey workshop. There are some optional activities if your group prefers those, but it will be very familiar to people who already use 7 to 9. So the workshop titles, the working titles are what is sexuality, understanding our bodies, body image, gender, attraction, healthy relationships, communication and social media, consent, sexual expression and pleasure, reproductive responsibilities, sexuality through adulthood, and caring for our sexual selves. So that's the news on that one. The next one we're going to be working on, or we are working on right now, we have author working on it, is OWL for young adults. That's going to be back to the other format as well. Turnkey workshops, but they're going to be 2 hours long. There will be 14 of them, and they'll be ready to use as is. Now, because young adult, you're using it maybe on college campuses or with folks who have jobs or babies or, all sorts of responsibilities. The way it's designed is there are a couple foundational workshops that we hope everybody will do. And then there are clusters or units that people can use that have maybe 3 to 4 workshops on related topics. Not that there's 4 on gender, but there might be anatomy and bodies. And so they'll be arranged in a way that people can choose their own adventure. And so this way, somebody on a college campus or a congregation or a church can say, look, we don't have people who can devote 14 weeks to this, but we have people who can devote 6 weeks to it. So let's do the foundational 2 workshops and then do this adventure, or let's do that adventure. And you can choose the adventures that you want to go on, or you can do all 14. So we're really excited about that. We're working with C.D. Beale, who is a wonderful religious educator and justice consultant and OWL trainer, very experienced. And we're just real excited to be bringing this to you. Now, the thing is, somebody asked earlier about field tests. We will need field test sites for this young adult curriculum. We hope to make that field test available this summer. We don't need a ton of sites, but we need sites with, hopefully 10 people, but close to that if you can get it. You don't have to do all 14 workshops. If you can just do the 2 foundational ones and at least one of the adventures, then that would be sufficient. So keep your eye out. Probably by March, March or April, we should have some information available on how to apply to be a field test site. So we're really excited about it. And please join us and let us know if you can get together. The age group is 18 to 35 for young adults. So you're not limited to college students. One of the reasons that we elected to start the field test in the summer is that we're hopeful that people can meet outside if health considerations are still an issue, and also that there might be people who's either they're on college break or their children are on summer break or whatever. So we're hoping that offering it in the summertime will help you there. Amy, why don't we take a break and answer some of the questions?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing too, is that I know some folks in like the Southwest who say like summer's bad because it's too hot to be outside. So so we will hopefully have a sliding time. So it's like early summer to late summer, depending on where you are. Okay, so a couple questions from our siblings up north in Canada. Is the 7 through 9 curriculum updated? So again, it is updated. It is a second edition because the first edition was from 1999. And we realized that it needs some updates from the 2014 version. So know that you can go to that page again, the uua.org/re/al/facilitators, and find the recommended updates for the 7th through 9th grade. So that takes care of some of the binary language and some recommendations for things to update to make it more 2022, if you will, than 2014. Also, is there any thought about reviewing materials from a Canadian perspective? You know, we do, like Melanie had said, we do have the 10 through 12 original author is from Canada. We do have a handful of Canadian trainers who we work with, and our critical readers are people that we find from all over the place. So I think that there are going to be some differences between Canada and the United States, no matter what we do. But I think that we are working towards having language that talks about in your area. And we're aware too that the landscape is dramatically changing here in the United States as well, and is likely to be quite different come June.
Yeah, I would. So Amy had mentioned in the chat that the author for 1012 is Nadine Thornhill is a Canadian sex educator. One of the things that we notice is that, you know, aside from spelling, you know, we're not gonna go with the British spelling. Sorry, we do standard US spellings here. But for example, some of the legal issues are different in Canada than in the United States. And one of those things was regarding sending sexting messages. And the legalities are different in Canada than the US. So while we are aware of those differences, we do default to the most conservative, which is the US perspective, on legalities and safety, just to protect any youth who need that. So if you are a Canadian and you want to alter, you know, by adding Canadian specific legal terms or whatever, feel free. That is absolutely within the realm of what you can do. But the printed version does need to reflect the US perspective, because that's where the UCC and the UUA are primarily working as far as this curriculum goes.
Yeah, and I want to say one other thing, Lisa, to your recent comment in the chat about diverse names. So here's what I would say about that. You know, I've done some work in Tanzania, for instance, and so there, you know, of course, if you're working with a particular population, you want to have names that reflect their language. So if you have folks who are Somali and Asian in your class, and you want to find, and usually many times the names are gender neutral, or you need to look at the scenario specifically, because it might specifically have something around gender that, you know, are the names gender neutral or not, those kind of things. So those are the things that are a little tricky in terms of just giving you blanket permission to change the names. But if you do want to include some cultural relevance, just be careful with that and try to do it to uphold the integrity of the curriculum. And also, I would say, really tread carefully if you are in a majority white population and you don't have Somali and Asian folks, but you're using those names. So be really just think, there's a lot to think about with that. And so that's what I would just offer to you. There's not like one easy answer for that.
Yeah, yeah. There was a question about updates to OWL Older, which I think I already addressed in terms of having discussions online. That's not something that we have on our plates right now. I really need to get 1012 off my desk before I worry about how to do OWL for older adults online. But what you might want to do is look at the suggestions for adapting the program for online use for 7 to 9, just in terms of the logistics of how we took some of that content and converted it into 30-minute conversations as opposed to 90-minute. So, especially with older adults, the older adult curriculum is 2-hour workshops, and you don't want people sitting online for 2 hours. So I would say stick with a half an hour format and just what's the gist of the conversation and the values that you want to have around a particular topic. And think of it more as a conversation than as a workshop that's done online. Because part of the richness of OWL for older adults in the way that I wrote it was to foster hands-on, in the room kinds of activities, and that just doesn't translate well to online, but the conversations can. So yeah, just use the 7 to 9 adaptation suggestions. And again, if you're doing anything online, please don't call it Our Whole Lives. Call it whatever you want to call it. And you're welcome to say it's, based on Our Whole Lives if you want, but just don't call it Our Whole Lives because it's not when you shorten it to that degree.
Yeah.
There was a question about digital stuff, and I will say that we are in conversations about that. Throughout the UUA and UCC, we're in conversation exploring what our options are. We can't share more than that at this point because we haven't made any decisions, but I will say we are exploring it. It's an exciting possibility to have digital resources, not only OWL, but for things like, for example, the posters that were the circles of sexuality and the OWL assumptions and the OWL values. They didn't sell a lot from when we had them in the bookstore, but if we make them available digitally, then you can take a thumb drive to Staples and you can have them printed out on your end. So we're looking at lots of different exciting things that we can offer you. We're just pretty far away from being able to announce anything at this point.
Not going to happen in 2022.
No.
Well, who knows? Maybe it'll tread carefully to our workload, Melanie. I don't know.
Somebody made a comment about digital things being easier for folks with vision issues. We have always made PDFs available for folks with vision issues. So if you have facilitators or even participants or parents who need to run a document through a Braille reader or an enlarger or whatever, contact me or Amy, and we can make that available. They're not publicly available, but they, on a per case basis, we can make those available to you.
Yeah.
We also have, for those of you who use the Sexuality and Our Faith visuals, we have image descriptions for those for people who are vision impaired. So again, those are the things that you can contact me and Amy for directly.
And those are the things that sometimes end up taking us off of our plan for moving forward with what we're doing.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting question here. Is there a plan to offer facilitator training for adult OWL? So there already is facilitator training for all adult levels. And there are some people who have, especially in the summer and early fall, well, actually even all the way through to early December, that they have had some trainings in person. And we are also, and those are still continuing. I believe there's going to be some in May. I don't know. We'll see. February, March, May. There's again, sort of that May to September time seems to be kind of a sweet spot right now for in-person. So we're still getting, there are still some up on our websites, on our calendars, and there's more coming in. I just talked to somebody yesterday about one on Memorial Day weekend out here on the West Coast. So so just know that those are still happening. And in terms of online facilitator training, this has been a huge undertaking because basically the UCC and the UUA, mostly the UUA, are acting as hosts of the trainings, which we don't normally do, and online, and we're working really, really hard with a lot of people to make this work. And we are so the way we are doing it right now is that we have two going this month, and 2 in March, and there will be 2 in May. All of those will be for the 7th through 9th, 10th through 12th grade, because those are the levels that people are requesting the most and always have requested the most. So, but this summer, we are hoping that by August and October, we can incorporate an elementary training and an all adult levels training online. So we have very limited space for those. We split them half and half. So half UCC participants and half UUA. We keep it to about 14 people in a training because of wanting to have, there's just all kinds of stuff, y'all, being able to see everybody on one screen, being able to have a small enough group that people can have discussions and have it work well online. And we found that that's kind of the sweet spot there.
I'd like to give a shout out to the trainers who have expressed interest in training online, because it's a very different way of training. And, if anybody's saying, well, why don't you do it monthly? Well, we have a limited number of trainers available to work online, but also they are used to leading an intense 3-day in-person training, and then they're done. And online trainings cover 3 weeks and involve reading comments that people post on course materials, reading personal reflections like journal entries. So it's a very different task that our trainers are doing. And so I just want to lift up the work that those trainers are doing. And also, for those of you who we're asking people to sort of lean back. If you already have a team of facilitators, to leave space in online trainings for those who do not currently have 2 trained facilitators. And it's a trust system. We're not running out to your congregation or your church to make sure. But we do want to make sure that we assist those folks who really need to get their programs off the ground. So if you already have a team, please just hold off and let us address this backlog of people who need to be training. And Amy has some folks who've never offered Our Whole Lives before, and has been personally recruiting people to enter these trainings. So we want to respect the UCC's share of training spaces. And so we ask for your patience until we ramp up some more. And there are some people that are not, that currently the online trainings are only for UU and UUA folks. We're hoping in the future that we can open them up to people who are not. But in the meantime, some folks are offering in-person trainings. So keep your eye on our calendars, and remember that if you have a cluster of either congregations or churches in your area, and partner up, contact the UCC if you're a UU congregation, contact Planned Parenthood, contact the private schools and the Boys and Girls Clubs. See if you can host your own training, if safety allows. So because we're only in charge of the online trainings. Anybody can host an in-person training, again, if safety allows.
Yeah, and there, somebody is asking in the chat, and again, I really just encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A, what levels are being offered. And again, all levels are being offered. It's just a matter of where, right? We used to have close to 70 trainings every year in the United States, with just a couple of those being in Canada. And so we don't have that many right now, but there are people who are offering them, and they are being offered from coast to coast. We have them on the East Coast in Pennsylvania, and we have them on the West Coast in Oregon, and we have had some in Dallas, and we've had some in Minneapolis. So really, you just need to look at the calendar.
It's in the chat. The link is in the chat. So you're welcome.
I'll also just make a plug for the Our Whole Lives newsletter, because that comes out quarterly. It's free, and there's a link in it to the trainings. So that would be like a reminder every quarter for you to kind of check that, see if there's any new trainings in your area. For the online trainings, I believe the March Eastern Time cohort is already full, but I do believe there are some, you just need to check the calendar. And we try to put up if it's full as soon as it is. But we have a Eastern Time cohort and a Pacific Time cohort. So it doesn't mean you can't be in Central or Mountain Time. You just have to do time zone math for that.
Which we have our own problems with.
All the time, and sometimes well. So anyway, that is what is going on, and we will have the May registration up as soon as we get this January cohort off the ground.
Yeah. There was a question about sharing resources in old videos and things. So if anybody who is either a program coordinator, like a DRE, a Christian educator, you know, whatever your title is, if you coordinate a program or if you facilitate, you can join an OWL email list and share resources, ask for resources. We are going to be moving at some point in this year to something called forums, and those will be archivable. Archivable, is that how you say it? So you'll be able to look for topics. So if you're looking for resources for K1, boom, you can follow that thread. That's happening later this year. But yeah, as soon as people are approved to become facilitators, they receive in their handout packet instructions for self-subscribing to the newsletter or to the email lists. And you can do that too if you're running a program. Yeah, share new resources. We're open to them, but also keep an eye on the recommended updates that we posted that Amy shared earlier, because we update those periodically as well.
I just want to say, if you want to sign up for the Our Whole Lives newsletter, go to ucc.org/OWL. Melanie and I work so closely together, y'all. So sometimes the UUA hosts something like we're using their platform for the online training, but we use the UCC platform for these webinars, and we use the UCC platform for the newsletter. The recommended updates are on the UUA. We'll hopefully get them on the UCC, but we're trying to really it's not like a UUA OWL and a UCC OWL, it's OWL. And the faith resources are some things that are what are different. Somebody's asking again about the 7 through 9 curriculum, and I just want to say again, please check out those recommended updates, because they are very specific and they go workshop by workshop, and they can help you with some of those things. And also, like we've said, multiple times throughout this webinar, that we put things, we get things as good as they can be for the time that we print them. And in 6 months, something can change, right? And it can be outdated, or somebody like Ellen DeGeneres, which is in here, is, like, that's not the best role model anymore. So that can happen. And that happens no matter who we are, or it's not just happening to us, it's happening anywhere. So, again, just using caution. And if you're using something that is not in the curriculum, make sure that you are letting those parents see that and letting them know that you're showing that, because that's your contract. One of our trainers says it so beautifully, that when you have that curriculum, that's your contract with the parents about what you're going to be teaching their children. So if you stray from that, first of all, that's not technically our whole lives. And secondly, you want to make sure that they're offering their agreement and permission for their kids to see anything that you are not taking out of the curriculum.
There is a question about can somebody about the grade levels and age recommendations. Yes, you can offer the K1 curriculum to a second grader or a third grader. What we recommend not doing is taking a second grader into the 4 through 6 program, or a 6th or 5th grader into the 7 to 9 program. The developmental stages are very different. And what we don't want to do is say, pick and choose. Oh, well, this second grader could go into the 4-6, but that second grader can go down to the K1. There are just so many things going on. It's really better to just always age it down than age it up. And remember, the social differences between 8th graders and 5th and 6th graders is extremely different. That's why we recommend, for example, having either one grade level per cohort. Let's say you do the 7 to 9 curriculum. Either do just 8th graders or just 7th graders or just 9th graders, or 7 to 8 or 8 to 9, but not 7 to 9, because the difference between somebody entering junior high and someone entering high school are typically really significant. So can you call it OWL if you put a second grader in a K1 program? Absolutely, because you're still offering our whole lives. You just have a child who's 1 or 2 years old.
Yeah. And, and I want to say that, I hear from smaller congregations all the time, and we know that you make your decisions, and we just are telling you what we know from years and years and years of best practice. There's a question here, Melanie, about can the UUA provide a list of approved OWL facilitators for my specific congregation? And the answer is yes.
No.
Oh, no.
Oh, for your congregation, yes. Yes, for your own congregation, yes. I'm sorry, I jumped again. You can just email owl@uua.org, or if you're UCC, you can email Amy. We both maintain lists of folks in different churches and congregations, and you can get absolutely what I was saying no to is that you can't say, we're short a facilitator. Can you send me the name of all the facilitators who live within 50 miles of me? Yeah, we can't do that because we don't invade people's privacy. Typically people want to facilitate for their own congregation. And but what you can do if you want, I don't know that it's ever been successful, but if you have one facilitator and are looking for another, your facilitator can post a note, or you can post a note on the facilitator email list saying, look, if you're within 30 miles of Duluth and you're willing to work, with our OWL program, please contact me. You can absolutely do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to, there's something in the chat. I want to I'm trying not to do too much in the chat because I'm trying to focus on the Q&A, but in the Our Whole Lives newsletter, there is a whole section on anti-racism resources. So be sure and check that out. Our congregation, our denominations and the OWL program draw a line around in terms of age for young adults and older adults, about 18 to 35 for young adults and over 50 for older adults. That's what the UUA or that's what the Our Whole Lives for Older Adults curriculum is written for. So those are the parameters. Whether or not you identify as a young adult or an older adult at those ages, that's what they were written for in terms of developmental stuff.
There are a slew of comments about 7 to 9 being outdated and the recommended updates being outdated or all white. Please note that as we create the recommended updates, we are mindful of trying to find new resources that address all sorts of different racial populations, different issues that people are dealing with. The recommended updates for 7 to 9 were written, 2 years ago, I think, maybe. Anyway, it wasn't within scope of the pandemic, let's put it that way. So those probably do need to be updated, but we just did, like the K1, 10, 12, and young adult are hot off the press, like within the last month. And we purposely did try to be more diverse in that. Is anything going to be perfect? No. But one of the things that we are doing now is that everything that we do when we're writing new content, not the recommended updates, but new content, goes through sensitivity readers and accountability readers who are not the same, who do not share the identities that we necessarily carry or the authors necessarily carry. So we have people with different racial backgrounds, different abilities, different gender backgrounds, different orientations. So we are getting those perspectives in everything that we now create. Let's see.
I'm trying to answer some of these questions because I know we're getting to the top of the hour here. I want to say that the 18 to 35, somebody's asking, should you do it in smaller age groups? That curriculum is written so that you can do it either way. And I've had a really great experience with having a great age range at the older younger adults and the younger adults having some really great conversations. So that's really up to you and what your group is working on. Melanie, do you want to talk about
Menopause is an L for older adults.
Yeah,
it is in the workshop on anatomy and physiology. And it's not an entire workshop on the topic by any means, but it is mentioned, as is pleasure and lubricant and all the things that can go into that. But it's not a menopause curriculum. We don't assume that everybody who takes Our Whole Lives has a uterus that is involved in menopause. We need to switch gears here, I think, and just in the last couple of minutes, talk about what's coming up next. We have begun, the UCC and the UUA have begun an initiative to update the visuals with sexuality and our faith because they are well outdated. That will be a multi-year project, but we have initiated it. We have gotten our first funding to completely re-envision how those visuals are handled. In the meantime, we have created a new narration, a new version of the narration that acknowledges trans folks, intersex folks that don't appear in the pictures or don't, so you don't look at those pictures and say, oh, well, there's a non-binary person, right? So the new narration acknowledges that. It has been reviewed by somebody who is qualified to have a trans perspective. And so we would encourage you, if you're going to be using the visuals, contact us for this new narration, the winter 2022 version of the Sexuality and Interfaith for grades 7 to 9 visuals. The other thing that we want you, well, we've already talked about the online training, so we don't need to talk about that anymore. Amy, did you want to talk about what's coming up in February?
Questions, Melanie.
I know, but we can't answer them all. We can still do that, but let's just give a promo for February and then go back to questions as we get them.
Yeah. Okay. So I would like to tell you that we are super excited. In February, we are going to be launching our Under Your Wing video series with Marshall Miller and Dorian Solat. And they have created 8, and hopefully we'll have all 8 ready, but we at least will have 7 ready by early February. And they are about 5 minutes each, and they talk about different topics that are in the K-1 revised curriculum, how to have conversations about those topics with young children, and also recommended storybooks. And they're just really a great resource. They'll be entirely free, and we will be launching them and hopefully showing you a few of them in our February webinar. Also, just a little plug that the UCC version of the Parents and Caregivers as Sexuality Educators is in production right now. So as soon as it gets pretty, it will also be up and available free of charge. So you will have that ability. At the UUA one has been out for a while. We've just been working with some UCC authors to get some scripture and UCC resources and stuff in there. So those are two things that are coming up that we're super excited about to be able to offer to all of you. And those are things that we've been working on in addition to all of these things. I see that there are like over 30 questions we have not answered. So know that we're going to do our best to save those questions. And also, if you are able to, if you have something that's just a burning question, you can email owl@ucc.org or owl@uua.org, and those things will get to Melanie and I. And again, we are working on the biggest, broadest strokes that we can in terms of getting updated materials out to you. And so some of the like really specific things like, do we have captions for the recommended videos in the 7th through 9th grade curriculum? No, we don't.
But you can turn them on YouTube. You can usually
that we produce necessarily.
Right. But you can usually turn on closed captions on YouTube videos. So you can handle that on your end. Andrea, if there's a way to capture the questions in the question box, Amy, maybe we can answer some of these in the next OWL newsletter. The ones that are general. Thank you all. And we appreciate your expressions of gratitude in the comments. That means a lot to us. So thank you very much. And we will see you in February, same bat place, same bat phone, the first Wednesday of February, noon Eastern in Canada. And we look forward to introducing Under Your Wing.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everybody.